you're taking. The projects we've already done, I don't think we're eligible for the bank. I know I asked about that once when I was working for Gene Calvert, the former director, if we could get credit for that, and the answer was we were doing that really with grant funding mostly, for the most part. The majority of it was grant funding, not our own dollars, and we couldn't bank it.
We had 30% of our own dollars in there.
That's true, but I asked that question once to Army Corps.
Which it comes to a hell of a lot more than 40 grand.
Well, if you total it all up, yes, there's a lot more than 40 grand there. That's true.
But at what point, though, Mr. DeShield, do we say to the state, wait, this doesn't make any sense? I know the one wetland area, and I quite frankly, I question whether or not the Corps jurisdiction, and because there were court cases that said if it's not navigable and you can't navigate a bunch of swamp that was there, I don't know if it's still considered core jurisdictional wetlands. But that's a question for Mr. Zotter. But nonetheless, at some point, where does the conversation occur between a strong county that's standing up and saying, wait a minute, to the state staffers? You had two staff members from the state of California, one from each agency that's referenced here.
Right.
We had a state representative from Fish and Game that told us we had to take Mill Creek dams out.
Yeah.
All right, and if we would have just kowtowed to that, we wouldn't have 3 dams up there right now, and then we'd have spent millions of dollars in taking them out. But we stood up and said no. We called foul, brought the director out, and said, "What the heck's going on here?" And we came to a resolution. What point do we do that with this?
Well, I guess we could do that at this point, but again, I think we've come up with a fairly pragmatic, practical mitigation. But if you want to...
Well, I don't want to hold the project up, for one thing. And so if negotiating this thing or continuing discussions is going to hold it up, then I've got a dilemma, personally, because I don't want to see this held up any longer. It's been going on for 10 years. But I'm disappointed that we're at this point and not taking a stronger position on it. So if we were to go back and visit this part of it, can we adopt this today and then go forward, or are we locking ourselves in?
I don't know. I've identified it as a mitigation measure.
Well,
It's a mitigate negative debt.
If the board attempts, I think, after the fact to try to delete mitigation, that it's essentially adopted as part of this project, you do run the risk of some sort of an enforcement action by Army Corps or the Fish and Game. I think Mr. DeShield's correct. You would want to negotiate those things up front as part of the way that you structure the project. But if you fail to carry out the mitigation measures and attempt, I guess, at that point to challenge them, of course, I see private developers do that, but usually while they're doing that, then the project does have to just sit. So unfortunately, I think it does come in this particular case to a question of whether you want to challenge the mitigation measures or go forward with the project. So. And
if we change that mitigation measure at this point?
Well, then I would still need a 404 permit and a 1600 permit, and that mitigation, being those agencies have, and again, they haven't issued those permits yet, but I would go back and say, well, we took it out of our CEQA document, but they could still say they want it in the permit. So they could still get it or something else. I don't know. I've got at least a verbal agreement from both agencies that they agreed to the idea of the in-kind mitigation to the Redwood Valley outdoor education program. Yeah. We looked at different things. We looked at doing some projects in McKee Park. We looked at what we could do in the area, say, to restore or do some restoration work. I think, Supervisor Delbar, you're looking to try and codify a mitigation bank for the good work the counties participated in the 5 counties program. And that's probably a separate issue to this. If we could get a bank account somewhere that says Mendocino County has this many square feet of wetlands coming, that would be something we could just deal with. I frankly have been working with the Corps on, we had some very serious problems over our last storm damage event in 2006. I found I spent many hours just trying to get a phone call returned from me from the Corps to get some funding through on some of our other projects. And when I found that they had agreement and the regional board with this solution for, as you say, $40,000, I thought, wow, you know, compared to the hundreds of thousands of dollars that I've had to haggle with them over, it just seemed like a very pragmatic solution to me. That did some good, and I don't know, it
guess
just
if they
seemed like
beat
a
us
good
up-
choice.
If they beat us up long enough and hard enough, then we can, everything looks good when it's not very big, but
Okay.
at what point, I'll wait and see what my colleagues feel on that one. The mitigation, who wrote this document? Is this an in-house document that we wrote, or do we hire somebody to write it?
We wrote this ourselves.
This is a road that's not connected to the river, with the exception of the southernmost part at the bridge, which I don't even know how much work you're doing at that point, and there's no connection to the river at the other end. Why are we limiting construction between July 15th and October 15th so to keep the channel dry? What channel? The ditches?
The ditches.
It's an irrigation ditch. They're gonna run with water regardless. I mean, we're our own worst enemy if we're putting these restrictions in. To me, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. I can see if we were constructing a bridge and we were in a waterway, that makes sense. We're not even close to it here.